Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Landon.
I'm Kason.
And today we're going to be discussing lots of good topics. First of all, there was a lengthy interview on Eurogamer.net with Hajime Tabata, the director of Final Fantasy 15. A lot of very interesting information there. I feel conflicted. It's like, in one sense, I hear some of the things he's saying, I'm like, I'm with you, man. I get it. And then he says some other things, and I'm like, ugh. But that's Tabata for you, you know what I mean?
Yep.
He's a good guy. Don't agree with a lot of his philosophy. We'll go over what he talked about in the interview. The Nintendo Switch Update 4.0, which just came out, is phenomenal. We're going to talk about how phenomenal it is because it lets you do video capture, which is what I've been asking for since the very beginning. Beasts for doing it. And they've even talked about, because I think right now it's constricted to 30 seconds, but they've talked about
it's limited.
Extending that in the future to be longer.
Maybe
videos.
1 minute. You could do a 1 minute Twitch stream. How great would that be, huh?
Okay, next one. Lost Sphear, which is the successor to I Am Setsuna, same team that developed I Am Setsuna, has had its first week of sales in Japan. The numbers don't look good. We'll go over that. Then we got some good topics from you guys, from the viewers here. Juan Soto asks, what did you think about the World of Balance part of FF6 being fairly linear, and the World of Ruin part, which is more open? You can do different things in order, and some things not at all. I personally felt like it was more interesting in the former part, the World of Balance part. So he wants to know what our opinions about the two sections of the game. Captain Awesome is asking us, when have you walked away from a game to never return to it? Did you regret it? What caused that decision? Were you ever really disappointed by a game that was near universally praised? That last part of it I actually pulled from a different question he had the previous week because he had been talking about the fact that he just played Secret of Mana for the first time. He wasn't feeling it. So we'll jump into that.
Interesting.
Fingers998 asks, do you think that the presence of online guides and the temptation to look at them can worsen the experience of playing a game these guides are for? Good question.
Interesting.
HD Baird, what would it take for you guys to throw your hands up with games in general? Let's walk away from it. I'm done with games.
No games ever.
I'm done playing games. What would it take? He goes in to explain what it would take for him. He feels like he's almost there.
Ooh, dang.
We got some cynicism to unravel here.
Sure. It's not impossible, but I would say it's unlikely for me to come to that conclusion.
Okay, topic number one. Let's go over this Eurogamer.net interview with Hajime Tabata.
Tabata, as he is sometimes called.
Tabata. Okay.
Hajime Tabata.
It's a long interview. I'll kind of pull it up here.
Yeah, it's really
long interview.
It's got good stuff though. Really good, like reflective stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. I'll put a link to this in the description at the top so that you guys can read it for yourselves. I think you should because it's a good interview. It's long, but it's worth the read. But there's just a couple of points in here that I want to go over, and the first one that I think I want to start off on. The reason I want to start here is because there's been a lot of criticism for Final Fantasy 15 on this channel. Lots and lots and lots of it, for sure. And I want to go over this part here. There's a lot that sort of... Whoops, let me select the right part. This part. There's a lot that precludes this, talking about, the fact that they were crunched for time, that they were worked to death. Long hours. Everybody on the team fatigued.
This sounds pretty typical of a Japanese company, really.
Yeah, but so read that if you have a chance. But this part in particular, I wanted to focus on. The interviewer asks, in the final stretch coming up to the release, I know there was a lot of pressure on getting it out on that date, as it moved a few times. Did you want to ask for another delay? A lot of people said it should have been delayed longer. We've talked about how there was possibly a contract involved that said they can't do that.
Right.
Hajime Tabata says, honestly, I didn't think of doing it. The project had been going on for 10 years at that point. Projects have a lifespan, and there's a certain limit you can take them to. You talk about limits, the team, the people working on the game. They're already way beyond their limits of their stamina and capacity. If I was going to take that away, that psychological pressure, and overwrite that with a new objective and goal, that wouldn't have worked out. So that wasn't an option. There are people out there with the opinion that there's stuff we released after the game came out that should have been in there from the start. That's fair enough, and I think that's a fair opinion, but there's just no way we could have done that physically. Having said that, looking at the team we have now, 1 year after the game came out, we've powered up so much as game creators. We understand a lot more about the preparations and scheduling required to make things on this scale now. And there's the feeling that we're able to do so many more things. We want to take full advantage of that in the next project. So, one thing I also want to mention before we start getting into opinions here is one thing that Hajime Tabata did that I actually really respect is that he had family days in the office where the developers would bring their families in to look at what they were making so that they could have some time to spend with their families, because you know that they're working all the time.
So it's not a family day like go home, spend time with your family. It's like stay at work, but your family's allowed in.
Bring them in.
That's as
show
family as Japanese companies get.
Show them what you're working on. And I think the idea behind that was like help them see like
why the sacrifice will be worth
why you never come home at night.
The scale of what you're making is so large, and this is why for this period of time I've been as busy as I have been, or whatever.
Right.
Considering the way, I don't know, like considering how this is structured in the industry, I mean, it's just something you don't escape from. There's no
exactly
there's no way around it, really, at this point for them. So if they're choosing to be game developers, this is going to happen. This kind of crunch.
It's not just a game developer thing, though. Like Tabata says in the interview, he ran into a lot of issues with how Japanese businesses are just run. You know, like he said, he restructured things like management-wise, which we've talked about before, whether that was a good or a bad idea. But it's just a fact of being in essentially any business in Japan is they expect a lot from you. One of the worst offenders is Dentsu. I don't know if you guys have read about Dentsu. They're like the biggest advertising agency in Japan. And usually when you read of someone dying from karoshi or overwork, it's someone at Dentsu.
The most recent case was someone at NHK, though. Do you hear about that?
I did hear about that.
That was surprising.
Yeah. It's just freaking a huge problem in Japan. They don't really care that much about it. So I imagine the games industry in Japan, because everyone's doing it. Your regular salary man is doing it. You know, not even in the games industry. So it's like, well, it's just. I can't imagine how atrocious these people's schedules are. I feel bad for them.
But if you can't go home to your family at night, it is nice to have a boss that will allow your family to come to you once in a while.
It's very kind.
It is unique, as Mike's. That's why Mike's bringing it up. Most companies don't even allow that, but it is still.
They're lucky. They're lucky it's a company where it would even be an interesting thing to do, because a lot of places would be like, "Come check out the accounting. Look at the spreadsheet your dad's working on. It's so sick.
Look at all the numbers."
It'd be like whatever.
Right. Yeah. But you know, I think it's a nice thing because it's so easy as an armchair critic, as we tend to be, to look at the final product of Final Fantasy 15 and be disappointed in it and say you should have done this. This should have been in the game from the start. It should have been delayed longer. This is how it should have been. And I think it's nice to put in perspective just how intense the workload was for these people, how unreasonable it is. It's not unreasonable from, I guess, the critic's perspective to expect a game that tells a complete story, though I don't necessarily agree it doesn't, per se, as much as it could have used more to make it more effective. But yeah, like it could have been better. But I think it's nice, is all I'm saying, to step back from a second, realize this is a video game versus these people's lives and well-being, and realize how freaking horrendous their crunch time was, and the fact that as much as you may agree or disagree with the approach to games as a service and how they're releasing a whole bunch of stuff even a year later, they're going to go into next year in development, which he goes over in this interview. I think it is nice, at least, that they are reinvesting that profit that they made on the game into a lot of free DLC, a lot of free updates to try and improve that stuff.
Right. That's the funny part, though, is what you read about at the very beginning of. I can't see your screen, but what you started reading when you were talking about how the deadline was too real. It was too. Well, he didn't really want to push it back. But, it was tough and difficult to meet. But after 10 years, they were like, we need this to be done. And the only thought that comes in my head is that with how heavily they've been going DLC-wise and with how many cutscenes they've added and with how they've kind of admitted that the story wasn't where it should be and that they've added things to help people to understand things a little bit better. In that sense, it kind of didn't matter when the game was released because the person who was asking them was saying, hey, do you wish you had another year to work on it, right? And he's saying, we just needed to get it done. And kind of the subtext of that is we can just keep releasing this stuff after the game's been released. We can just keep making cutscenes. We can just keep making story content and additional things after the game is out. We didn't have to delay the game. We could just release an unfinished game and finish it later throughout the next year. And I don't think that's great. I don't at all. But that is kind of the reality there. My opinion is that it absolutely should have been delayed. It's weird that they released it and then he's kind of saying, oh, but it's great because we can just finish it later. It's kind of what I'm getting from the interview. And I that's so weird to release a game and then say that. I don't know.
It's like a natural evolution of like, it used to be that you couldn't patch a game once it was out, right? Like SNES, and if the game had a bug in it, you could fix it in a new print run of cartridges. But nowadays, and for the last couple decades, you've been able to upload a patch and continue to tinker. And this is just like a bigger version of like a story patch, like the interviewer says. This is the first game I played that has a story patch, right? Like we're at the scale of we're not just patching bugs, we're patching literal major components of the game. But I actually have a thought, because when he's talking about this, like I used to work construction in Arizona, and one of the things with construction was that if the foundation isn't completely settled on a house, you do not start framing, you don't start drywalling, you don't start any of that other stuff until the foundation is settled. And so a lot of my job was we had these big things we'd stab in the ground and we'd pump water under the foundation, because this is Arizona, no one has a basement.
Right.
So it's just like a couple feet down. And you try and get that ground to settle a little more. And so sometimes the foundation would crack, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was okay at that stage if it cracked, as long as it settled completely. And then you could fix that a little and then start building the house on top of that. And so there were some houses in one of the neighborhoods that I worked in where they hadn't done that. It wasn't properly settled. And I remember one of the worst ones was a house that a family had been living in for years, had a crack going all the way down the middle of their house. All the way down their house. It was the floor, it was the wall, it was the roof. It was insane. And so we had to go over there a lot. A lot of man hours were wasted trying to fix problems that were created because either rushing the foundation stage or not actually doing your due diligence at the beginning of a project.
Dude, you should give a TED talk about
right. Right. But I feel bad for Tabata because you hear what he's saying here, where he's like, guys, we physically could not have done more than we did.
Right.
But then he's also saying we have to be realistic and just freaking be done at some point, because he inherited a cracked foundation that wasn't settled, right? Yeah. And they started building crap. And then it's like, oh, dang it. Maybe if we do this, and then and then it's so much worse. And so obviously the best case scenario was that they had a good foundation to begin with, but sometimes it's like water under the bridge, crap. This just has to be finished, you know.
Just do better on Final Fantasy 16, I guess.
So that's kind of my thought process there a little bit. Is like I just feel really bad. He inherited something that wasn't properly settled and was still kind of up in the air as what it was even going to be. And so that's why when I hear him say this, it's like, okay, I believe you. I believe that at the point that you guys were at, you were at your wits' end, and it was like, this is crazy. We should just freaking be done with this.
Yeah, just be done.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that there is a lot of merit in saying that he inherited a foundation that wasn't settled or that was cracked to begin with. We don't know the details of that. We have rumors of people who worked on it who talked about like what the project looked like before, but it's obvious that it wasn't settled yet. They were still trying to figure it out before Nomura got moved off of that project and Tabata had to just tackle it. Now, I say that with the caveat that I don't like any game that Tabata has directed, not a single one. So
pretty big caveat.
I am not a fan of his work.
Right.
That being said, I don't think he is to blame for the problems, the structural problems of Final Fantasy 15. I think considering everything that was going on behind the scenes with this game in particular and the baggage surrounding it, it might be as good as it could have been at launch.
Right.
Taking away, artistic choices like should we focus only on this character's perspective or those sorts of things.
Right.
But I'm saying like in terms of its level of completeness, in terms of it's just such a tough thing to point at one person and be like it's your fault or this team is not competent or whatever.
Well, and Square Enix hadn't really done an open world game like this before. Right?
No, this was their first.
And I think it's tough to really swallow the fact that open world games are a different beast. And if you've never done one, I don't know. They must have brought consultants from somewhere that had worked on projects, or if they didn't, they were literally learning a whole new approach on the fly, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit, but there's some other really interesting things here in the article too. One of them is that this team, the Final Fantasy 15 team, is still fairly large. It's over 100 people strong. Still.
Just the post-release team is massive.
Yeah. So, we had speculated in the past whether or not that team was being disbanded to go help with Final Fantasy VII Remake or other places, but that isn't the case. I mean, I'm sure it's not as large as it was right at crunch time of development, but the team is still huge.
Yeah, they've kept probably a third of the people still, and it's crazy.
So that being considered, he's talked in this interview about the next project that this team will be working on. Which is going to be an entirely new IP. So he's not working on a Final Fantasy game next. They're still in very early stage pre-production kind of area with that project. But they're saying they're going to continue to use the Luminous engine.
See, and that's
that game.
Crazy, I think. So this will be the second game ever, and for the foreseeable future, to use that engine. Very interesting. If they are staying on Luminous, it's basically a guarantee that this next game will also be open world.
Yeah, I would think with the experience that this team has had now developing an open world game, with the experience they've had with the way that they've structured their DLC and games as a service kind of model post-launch of the game, I would think that there are other interviews and other things we've read in the past and things people have sent to me that suggest Square Enix is sort of moving in that direction. They like that business model of games as a service.
Yeah.
I would think that Hajime Tabata's project that he's talking about they're moving on to is going to sort of embrace that right from the start and will be an entirely new IP, not a Final Fantasy game. So for those of you who are not super fond of his directorial style, for Final Fantasy, he's not directing Final Fantasy 16.
Right.
He and his team...
Or 17. I think it would be more likely that if he was going to do another Final Fantasy, that it would have been 17, since 16's likely been in production for a couple of years now already. But that would pit it way too far in the future.
Right. So he's working on something totally new, and you know, his team, that core team, is still kind of together, sort of moving in that direction once they finish with their Final Fantasy 15 content that they're still releasing into next year. Yeah. So that's the main points. A lot of really good stuff in the interview, though. Like I said, however you may feel about games as a service or the direction the company is moving or whatever, however you may feel about that, I think it was a good insight into just how stressful the development for that game was, how messy it was, and how hard they really, really worked to try and make something special out of it.
Right.
And
you know, I can respect that.
Yeah, and if you really, really just did not like it at all, he's not working on the next Final Fantasy. So there you go.
It's Project W. That's why.
Project W. I was wondering if the game he was talking about, since they're still using Luminous, would maybe have been to Final Fantasy 15 too. But that seems, you know, since it's a new IP, that seems less likely. It seems like instead of having a sequel, they'll just keep doing the DLC thing.
Oh, and then the other thing on top of that was that they're focusing on next gen. So they're taking Luminous Engine, but they're probably developing it in a way so where it's the next generation. This is a game not for PS4 that they're starting on, so, which is smart
because he said they're not even in pre-production yet.
Yeah,
like they're pre-production, which is like, hey, this game's years down the line, and PS5 is going to be reality by that point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's one. Right. Oh no, never mind. Just at the very end, he talked about whoever's directing the next Final Fantasy.
Oh right.
To get ready to give your entire life to this game.
Yep.
That was his advice for the other people.
Like, I don't have direct advice, but I can tell you that for the fans, they expect nothing less than for you to give absolutely everything you have to this. So the expectations and the pressure involved are a big deal. Mm-hmm. Which is why, by the way, I read today that why David Fincher did not agree to work on Star Wars Episode 9.
Yeah, I can't blame anyone who doesn't want to work for Disney. Jeez.
No, and so many directors have now left. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. The pressure, the expectation is just so high for, you know,
the meddling.
Like that.
Meddling is just so high.
The meddling is also a problem.
That's a big issue. But also see, J.J. Abrams can comfortably come into Episode 9 because he's one of the meddlers.
And
he's on the team. He's one of the
He's on the same page with Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, he and Kathleen were in the same room when they came up with the whole thing. Yeah,
they see the same vision, which I have Star Wars disease, so you know it is what it is.
We'll see in
December. I haven't even watched the new trailer.
Yeah, I haven't watched it
purposely. I'm like Star Wars blackout starting now.
Yep.
I did, and I won't say anything. Okay. Topic number 2. Nintendo Switch update 4.0.0. Okay, guys. I don't remember if we said this on a podcast or if this was like when we unboxed it. I feel like I said it at some point in our Switch coverage earlier in the year. I was like, you know, this thing is so sweet. I love that I can take it off the dock and I can kind of play it in bed as I'm, you know, going to sleep or whatever. But man, I run a gaming channel and I really wish I could, when something interesting happens, just boop, like record that thing that just happened and save it for later. Kind of like NVIDIA does with their GeForce
Shadow Play,
where there's a button on it and you can kind of set like a limit for like, I want to record the last 2 minutes, last 5 minutes. I think it could go up to like 10 minutes actually, which is pretty crazy. But so yeah, it's like anytime you're playing, you don't have to just constantly record. Anything that interesting happens, you want to capture that, you just boop, press that button and records the last however much time you set. Well, the Nintendo Switch has now put that capability into its capture button, which used to be just for taking screenshots. But now you can record up to 30 seconds of video with that button. If you just hold it down, I believe. You hold the button down and, like, bam, you can get 30 seconds of video.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's better than nothing for sure. And I'm very excited by the prospect because anytime, like, something really crazy happens, I think this is ideal for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, exactly. Anytime you do something crazy, that's what this is for. This isn't for logging or anything like that. This is just like, holy fetch, something crazy happened. Redo that.
Boom. Yep. I want to see that again. But they are saying that in future updates that they could extend that up to a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. I think 2 minutes would probably be enough because most cutscenes are not much longer than 2 minutes, especially in Nintendo games.
Yeah.
So, you could capture something, basically anything interesting that happens to you with 2 minutes of time. I think that's awesome. I'm a big fan of the versatility of the Switch, and this in particular for me, because the only time I play the Switch is literally as I'm going to bed at night. Like I don't really play it in here in the office, with the displays. I don't really ever have it in a situation where I'm like hooked up to record footage, unless it's like, when we were covering Breath of the Wild and we were trying to record footage as we go. I love the convenience of the system in general, like the idea. And this is a feature that like perfectly coincides with its like convenience. I don't know, like what's the right word? Not motif, but how convenient it is in other areas. So,
so have either of you guys tried it yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I've tried it, and here's the one issue with it: it's pretty compressed.
No,
is it bad?
The footage you get, it's not bad. But like Breath of the Wild is like a 720p game. It's not even 720p.
Okay.
Like it looks great because like I found so many people the past week, mostly Japanese Twitter accounts,
I've been
tweeting
those,
the craziest crap. I saw one today. I don't know if you guys seen this one where it was like he threw his boomerang. It was like one of the big metal ones. And
yes, I saw that.
He grabbed it with friggin' magnesis, and then it was like a spinning saw blade at the end, and he was like chopping dudes.
That was actually really cool.
I never considered that before. But yeah, like it when I play them back on the Switch, they look pretty compressed to me. Like for example, like in
even on the screen, like the small screen.
On my TV screen, I don't know. I haven't tried playing it back on the smaller screen. But like for example, like the hearts in Breath of the Wild, those look a little fuzzy. So I don't know if like they'll get it to where it'll be a native resolution capture that's less compressed.
I freaking hope so.
I know, because that would be nice. But right now, it feels geared towards a little more like social media.
It's just geared towards
just tweeting out something crazy that happened to you, not necessarily for video creation, which they don't like anyways.
So that's a little.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but. They don't want you freaking making videos about their stuff,
right? Exactly.
But
I would what I really would like to see is if they had some sort of I don't know, app or widget or something that would pull up so that you could have some level of customization over that. Like I want to record 720p footage at this bit rate and for this amount of time or whatever, and you could sort of you have some sliders there.
Yeah, and the fact that it only works with certain games right now, it makes me wonder if there's a constraint in the hardware.
Right, because it would have to be recording all the time in case you wanted to.
Yeah, so like
that's true.
Recapture something.
I don't know what the technical reason is why it doesn't work on everything. I think a lot of developers just have to opt in or something. But right now, I think it's like ARMS, Splatoon, Breath of the Wild, and Mario Kart. Are the ones I know for a fact work with it.
Well, even if I had tried to use it yesterday, it wouldn't have worked because I was playing I Am Setsuna. So
fetch. See, and like you would imagine, it should work fine in I Am Setsuna. It's just
I would really hope so.
I'd also heard that there was an update to the controllers. Did you download that one too? There's like a separate update. If you pause, go to system settings, go to controllers, and then you can update
like firmware for
the controllers. Yeah.
And what does that do?
I don't know. Nobody knows actually. Well, I don't know if say nobody knows. Back when it was released, I didn't know who knew. Now maybe somebody's figured out what it is. But there's another thing that nobody was aware of that got patched in this 4.0.
Yeah.
You can now use a GameCube controller using the GameCube adapter for the Wii U. That now works on the Switch.
Where would you plug that in?
There's a USBs in the back when you open the shell and
on the side too.
It has to be docked, but yeah, there's USB ports there. But they didn't make it public.
No, they didn't.
I found this out from GameXplain, and they actually tried it out, and it works.
Holy crap!
Like you can play Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, they didn't like announce it, which makes me think it may not be
kidding
yet, like fully ready to go.
Well, what if that was for the purpose of GameCube Virtual Console?
It could be a Virtual Console.
Ooh, there's Virtual Console. There's also, I don't know when that new Smash game's coming out, but yeah, there's a few.
I would be blown away if that was even like 2 years away from now.
It depends on if they think porting Smash 4 would be worthwhile.
Which would be fine. I don't think anyone's expecting anything more than a port of Smash 4.
That I could see. A new Smash Brothers game
that's not
before
gonna be for a while.
2020, I don't know about that.
Because Sakurai has talked about how he kind of wants to do other things. He doesn't want to keep doing Smash all the time. And so...
He's in like Groundhog's Day, just making
the same game. Just port 4. Just port it. Everyone loves it. There's no reason
it's worked for Mario Kart, and, you know, I don't know. It might not be such a bad idea.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, that's crazy,
though. That's awesome though. If
there's a lot here.
It's weird though that Nintendo would put that unless it was an accident, but then not say, "Hey, you can use GameCube controllers on your games now." Like, what the fetch?
They might just be waiting for next year. But yeah, why did they do it now then? I don't know. I don't get it. But this was a pretty significant update, as you can tell by the 4.0.0. This is now version 4, not 3. So it's a pretty big deal, right?
I'm trying to think. Is there... Because the only difference between the GameCube controller and like a regular Switch controller, right, is that there are 2 shoulder buttons on the left side.
Well, and
so,
the analog...
the analog triggers, but I would assume that it wouldn't recognize it until you press it all the way down. Using it, but would there be like in Breath of the Wild? I'm trying to remember. Is there an L? What are they called? LR and LZ?
Yeah, there's only a Z in GameCube.
So how would you play the game if you don't have that? If you don't have that second shoulder button?
Yeah, it must just be used for certain things. Then it must not have a use in every game. You know,
maybe you just can't use your freaking.
Can't do it. You also can click in the controllers on the Switch, and you can't, or the joysticks. You can't do that on the GameCube. So there's
that's
3 buttons total missing.
That's how you lock on, isn't it?
Oh, in Breath of the Wild?
Is it
that's how you pull up your like telescope thing?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Actually,
you would click in the right stick.
Remember.
Yeah, click in the stick, and then you can like look in the distance or whatever.
And then you click in the stick to sneak left stick, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yes. But that actually wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because
I know
you always do it on accident when you're trying to fight
this enemy, and all of a sudden Link's like crouching along, and this guy's pummeling me.
Ever since I started using the Pro Controller, that has not happened to me on accident. No.
Really, I need to get one of those, dude. I really need to get one of those. For sure, because that happened to me a lot in Breath of the Wild, in particular. A total accident. Just while I'm fighting, I'm just trying to strafe, and I'd click in, and then he'd be crouched. Yep. Happened to me a lot when I first started playing. So, gotta get that Pro Controller.
Gotta be professional.
The professional.
How could that game have been a perfect game when if you accidentally click that stick in, your character stops running? Like. How could it have been you can't give that a 10 out of 10. You can't.
Dude, I remember. You remember back in the day when sneaking, you had to hold the click in?
Oh.
Yep. I like
early
that
on.
A lot better.
I think like in Halo, in the first Halo, that was how you crouched, I think.
And then when you let go, he got back up?
Yeah, I think you had to keep it held in. Somebody can tell me I'm wrong about that.
I've never liked clicking in the sticks for anything.
No,
because I move while I'm pushing down. I'm moving in a direction. Yeah. One of the Call of Duties, or maybe it was Halo, where you would zoom in by clicking in the control stick. One of them, I don't know. Anyways, I hated that because as soon as I clicked it in, my dude zooms in and then he's already moving because I'm moving the stick because I'm pushing.
It makes way more sense. It's way more intuitive, which is why every first-person shooter does this now, to use the triggers to aim down the sights.
Yeah,
the left trigger to aim down the sights, the right trigger to fire for shooters. The only time where I've ever thought that the implementation of pressing in sticks was a good thing was for locking on in Souls games, locking on to enemies.
You prefer that
you toggle with the right stick, right?
Yeah, because you use the shoulder buttons for your attacks in left and right hand, which I also think is very intuitive. So like your left hand is the left bumper, and the right attack is on the right bumper. Cool. And so I like locking on with the stick, and they actually do it in a lot of games now, but for like third-person melee style combat. But to crouch or to aim or anything like that, nah.
Yeah, I'm not frustrated.
I'm not about that life.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, Mario Odyssey comes out in like 2 days.
Oh yeah, it does. Oh, I
get that.
I finally got to try it at GameStop.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, because they have it in Walmart
Yeah,
too,
it was at the mall with my wife, and it was like, what the fetch? Okay, let's play this. So we just played it. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
The only thing, and I don't know if they've tweaked this at all. The only thing is that I felt like, because the game's phenomenal. Like I was really enjoying what I love about it. I know we're talking about Mario Odyssey, not the Switch 4.0 update anymore.
Yeah,
but the one thing I loved about it is that you don't get, like, in this game it's moons, right? But usually they'd be star collectibles or like star coins or whatever. You don't get it and then like, yay, leave the level, go back in and get a different one. It's like you just go through it and you can get them all in one go. I love that.
Yeah,
it's just like a really seamless, fluid experience. Super great design choice there.
Yeah.
I did feel like I didn't have quite the precise control of Mario's jumps. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, I noticed that it just felt different. And I don't know if it was because I'm too used to playing Breath of the Wild or other games lately. I'm not sure. And the question for me is, after an hour or two, will I be over it
adjust
or not?
to it?
Yeah, right. I can't. But I noticed, it feels a little different.
Yeah, I had a hard time. I died several times from misjudging jumps. So like I jumped in like I like way left or like way not far enough. I missed it, like was short by like quite a bit. I was like, what the heck? It didn't feel as tight as I expect Mario to be generally. But you're right. I don't know if it has to do with just a matter of adjusting to it, or if it's a matter of it actually being substantially different from how past Mario games have controlled or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But it'll be here in a couple days. There seems to be a lot of positive buzz about it from people who have been playing it.
Yeah.
So
a lot of reviewers have been paid off, man.
Obviously, Nintendo. They're only giving him a 10 because it's Mario.
Like just brace for it right now. Expect a lot of 10 out of 10s.
This game's shaping up.
Then we'll have to have the conversation all over again about how there's no such thing as a perfect game, but this is still
how
sick,
is this game a 98 on Metacritic?
But it's
it's happening, people. Get ready for it.
I'm really, I don't know, because I'm trying to finish I Am Setsuna. I think I'm close to finishing it. But I like to open up my Switch library to start playing Mario Odyssey at night. But I also really want to get into Divinity Original Sin 2. Before Xenoblade 2 drops in December. So I've got like a month. So I'm sitting here going like, do I just wait on Mario Odyssey till like next year or something, or do I try and beat it like, because I'm sure it's not that long. I'm sure I could probably beat it in a week or something, but I just don't know. I don't know.
I'm waiting on
conflicted.
I've got too much other stuff. It's like it's too much.
Way too much going on. Okay, let's jump into Lost Sphear's sales in Japan.
Speaking of I Am Setsuna.
Yeah.
Yes. So I Am Setsuna, I like it. Sue me, I think it's good. A lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest RPG ever. And the fact that they used Chrono Trigger as some kind of comparison makes sense because it's the only other RPG I've ever played that feels like it's structured the same way in a lot of ways.
You know what, though? So the reason we're talking about Lost Sphear is that because it sold opening week, it sold a quarter of what I Am Setsuna sold its opening week, right?
Yes.
And you bring it up the Chrono Trigger thing, and it's funny because the question is why if I Am Setsuna wasn't like this super great game, it was above average, but it was a middle of the road RPG game. Why did it sell so much better than what Lost Sphear is doing right now? And I think it comes down to that Chrono Trigger comparison, that whether or not it really was like all that close to what Chrono Trigger was in the beginning or not. The fact that they talked and said the name Chrono Trigger in their advertising resulted in what appears to be 4 times the sales of what they normally, Tokyo RPG Factory, being a brand new studio with no following, would otherwise have been able to get, judging by what they've gotten with Lost Sphear, which had 0 Chrono Trigger mentions in their marketing, and has sold a fourth of what I Am Setsuna has sold. The games are brand new, original games from an unknown company, right? They're pretty comparable in that regard. Lost Sphear even looks a lot like I Am Setsuna, with like the perspective and just with the way
graphic style.
Played. Yeah. So the only difference that I can see is the Chrono Trigger comparison was there last time, not there this time, and no one's buying it now. What do you think about that?
It's. I think it's a fair point.
But
because
was that a good thing for them to have compared it to Chrono Trigger? Given, you know, sure, it makes them more money, but was that really a fair comparison?
Well, I think it is, because because I think what the problem is that people are seeing the comparison of Chrono Trigger and they're thinking quality, like overall level of quality of the experience is going to be like Chrono Trigger. Oh, fetch, that's my favorite game. I got to buy that. But I think the comparison, I think the comparison is fair when you're saying, like, design-wise, it's very similar to Chrono Trigger, and it was. Right. Like, the way they handle overmap, the way they handle enemy placement, the way that they handle a lot of the battle system, the techs, the way that the different characters can combine their techs together for, like, a double tech or triple tech or whatever. There were actual design, like, choices in the game that are directly comparable or comparable to Chrono Trigger. So I think that comparison is fair. What I think the problem is that people then had the expectation for a game that is as good, as memorable, as long-lasting, timeless, pun intended, as Chrono Trigger was. And that's the issue with using that in your branding and marketing. Right. But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with making that comparison when you're just trying to explain to people this is kind of what this is what it's based on. This is how the game plays. It's similar to this. And for that reason, I really like I Am Setsuna. I don't think it's in the same league as Chrono Trigger, storytelling-wise, or even like music or anything like that. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of problems with it that are, I think, totally fair. But that's the first game I would compare it to, because it's the only other RPG I've ever played that had that similar of design structure and ideas. So I know Lost Sphear is not. It is not the same. They've changed a lot of those systems. And so you can't make that comparison to Chrono Trigger anymore. And maybe they felt like it was a bad idea because people had an expectation for quality that they didn't get, and maybe they avoided that on purpose this time.
I could see that. I could totally see that. Because they kind of dug themselves. I mean, it's like whenever an NBA commentator compares a rookie basketball player to Michael Jordan. It's like you're setting the kid up for failure. Like that person will never live up to that. Talking exactly about Lonzo Ball. Anyways, but you know, there's no way that this player can be considered successful because they will never attain that. And so definitely, like, but at the same time, it sold them a lot of copies of a game that no one knew about, you know? So I can see there being a little conflict there. You're right, though, that Lost Sphear does have some unique elements that kind of distance it a little bit. But I almost wonder if, because it is still an original game from an unknown studio other than I Am Setsuna, that they maybe could have picked something else. I don't know. This gets into their marketing, though. And honestly...
They should have based it on FF6 this time.
Whatever, exactly. It was something like that. And I don't want to make the point that you have to do that, though. A game should stand on its own. You shouldn't have to resort to marketing tricks to get people thinking one way so that they buy a game, right? But it's just crazy that it's not really selling very well. And it makes me wonder how long the studio is going to be around if the only games they can sell are the ones that they compare to, you know, the best games ever made.
Do we know what... like Famitsu, the score for Famitsu was what people are saying about it in Japan.
I'm looking up some scores for them. I did not see Famitsu's score for Lost Sphear. Let's see real quick.
Famitsu,
but because I mean, there's one aspect of it that's you know, I Am Setsuna was seen as an average game, so there's going to be fall off already.
It's
and
true.
people are like, I didn't really like I Am Setsuna.
I mean,
whatever,
I wouldn't expect a 1/4. That's an insane fall off. Like, that's massive. But you're right. That is to be expected to some extent.
We'll need to compare this to I Am Setsuna's just because Famitsu is weird. But Lost Sphear, PS4 and Switch versions both got 8s across the board for 32 over 40. So
it's like an average Famitsu score, right?
Like an 8-ish, I guess. Yeah. Let me see what I Am Setsuna got from Famitsu. Let me
because Famitsu tends to inflate their scores quite a bit.
And they have different reviewers like every issue. So it's like who played this? Like okay, this should be okay. Here it is. It's the same, dude. They got 8s across the board for I Am Setsuna as well.
Huh.
So it's about the same quality of game.
Well, right, that's what that tells me, yeah.
Taking into account that there's different people reviewing this one than that one, so it's not the same people, but let's just say it's quality-wise about the same. I would think that would mean a lot of people would just look past it, because I don't think anyone hates I Am Setsuna or thinks it's a terrible game necessarily, but it's just like... Right. I'd rather spend my time on something else that's a little better. So I'm going to buy that game because I liked I Am Setsuna a lot. Or I shouldn't say I liked. I do like. I'm still playing it. But I don't know, man. I come from that time, so that maybe that's a factor too.
No, it's true.
Probably.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, part of the idea here was that they're returning to the design philosophies of like late 90s, early 2000s RPGs. And I hope... I don't know. You could argue that the execution isn't there at the same level, so don't take this to mean people aren't interested anymore. But people, I think, can legitimately look at this and go like, maybe people don't really care that much in a large enough number anymore that these aren't the types of games being made.
Or they only care if you bring up Chrono Trigger.
If you mention Chrono Trigger.
And then people care, you know.
But that being said, this is like purely speculative, but I feel like there's a little more of that nostalgia in the West than there is in Japan. Japan's a place where they've fully embraced like mobile phone games, right? Like here in the US, there's a lot of people that still disparage that, and so I would be interested in seeing if it follows the same pattern, or if maybe they can learn from this and go like, crap, we better kick it up a notch with the marketing.
That was what we hoped.
It's February in the West, right?
February. February.
We've only seen one like real gameplay trailer.
But what's so weird to me, and I guess it kind of makes sense, but like project like Octopath Traveler, I feel like there's more hype for right now. People are excited for that, and I just don't. I haven't seen anyone like super pumped for Lost Sphear the way people were excited for I Am Setsuna. There were people that were like, oh man, yes, they're doing what I'm asking for. Another Chrono Trigger spiritual successor. But Lost Sphear is like, who's super excited about Lost Sphear? I'm not really sure.
I would say I was more drawn to Lost Sphear than I Am Setsuna, personally, as far as the way it looks and the gameplay story. Like, it just seems a little more unique. I Am Setsuna seemed a little bit more on the generic side, but
yeah, I think the concept of Lost Sphear is really cool. It's like a pseudo nothing from the Never-Ending Story.
Yes, exactly.
People are just forgetting things and things are just disappearing.
Yeah, things are disappearing.
I think that's a super cool concept. So I'm excited for the game for that reason. And I think that I Am Setsuna is a solid enough baseline. You know, we're talking about what my brain doesn't work today. Freaking first topic. You're talking about construction.
Foundation.
Oh yeah.
It's a strong enough foundation, I feel, to build upon. That I think that Lost Sphear has potential to be pretty sweet. I think what it really comes down to is whether they have a little more emphasis on strong storytelling, and not, instead of sticking to sort of like the generic JRPG tropes there. And being predictable, which could or could not. I mean, I like the concept, but we don't know in practice until we play it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm excited for it, but I am much more excited for Octopath Traveler since I played it. And it's actually really, really good.
That game take over the world.
So I would hesitate to say that people can't get into the older design philosophy. Well, I don't know, because Project Octopath Traveler has a lot more of the Bravely Default sort of like innovations on a classic system than like the straight up like Chrono Trigger design philosophy. So maybe that's part of it too, is like they actually get their hands on it. It's like, despite the fact that I didn't grow up in the 90s with these RPGs, this is actually really fun versus, but I don't know, like I still think that tradition, like I go back and play old Final Fantasies, they're just as fun now as they were then for me, and maybe that's nostalgia, I don't know. It's just so hard to say whether or not it's just the fact that it was an average game and that's why we're seeing this, or whether it is that people aren't interested in how older games were developed.
Because there are other studios still making things similar to like that era, like the Trails, Trails series, for example. So, but I don't know what they sell. You know what I mean? And you don't have to sell like 1 million copies to be a success. It's all like, how big was your team? How long did it take? And I think with same with like Ys, I think there's like they've got like really hardcore fans that follow the series. And as long as they have those people, like they're going to be fine. So like Tokyo RPG Factory, they're probably still feeling it out. I hope this doesn't end their run, but I think they need to cultivate like a core group of people that are really committed to what they're trying to do, and then they can be successful at the level that works for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. In any case, I'm gonna buy it.
I'll
probably really like it. I'll probably like it a lot. Oh, are they doing a physical copy of this, or is it just gonna be straight digital?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Because I'm gonna have to freaking buy an SD card for the Switch.
Yeah.
With all your download games.
Because I have a lot of games I've downloaded. So
yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our viewer suggested topics. Juan Soto, to start off. What did you think of the World of Balance part of Final Fantasy VI and the World of Ruin part? He's talking about how the beginning part, World of Balance, is a fairly linear experience, and then it becomes a little bit more open. You can do things in different order, or just not do them at all. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VI, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's been many, more than 20 years. Wait, is that even right? 1993? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
More than 20 years.
Yeah.
We're old as fetch. I personally felt a lot more interested in the story in the former. Okay. This is actually... I was watching Lore Runner's run of Final Fantasy VI that he did recently, and he kind of touched on this a little bit, how even at the time the game came out, he had said that a lot of people were like, oh, the game gets boring at this point, at the World of Ruin. And it's like the beginning part's way better. I've heard that from a lot of people who aren't the biggest fans of FF6. And funny enough, my first time playing the game, I didn't actually finish it. I quit playing at the World of Ruin. So I think there is certainly some... There's some, I guess, I don't know, like credence to that point of view. It certainly does not feel as focused. But the best scene in the entire freaking game, and possibly the entire series, happens right at the beginning of the World of Ruin. So I was hooked all the way through that scene. And then after that, it was like, okay, I got to go find the guys. Okay, I guess I'll go here. I don't know. Like, I started on my initial playthrough, I'm saying, to lose interest at that point. And so I feel you. On subsequent playthroughs of the game, I've learned to really like what they did with that section, and thematically and everything like that. I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I like it more now, for sure, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. I think, like, there's a lot of games that do similar things, like with the gameplay mechanics, where you you will have amassed like a ton of weapons, or you've become very powerful, and then at some point in the game they take those things away from you, and then you realize, wow, I was really awesome, and now I kind of suck again, and then you have to work your way back up. Yeah. And I think some people don't respond very well to that kind of thing. Sometimes it's like, you just took something from me, like and Final Fantasy VI. I feel like it's a really bold thing what they do in the game at that point. And it's like, wait, what? Are you freaking kidding me? Partly because the cast of characters is so huge in that game that the prospect of tracking everyone down again and kind of, well, I had this guy already, I've got to go get him again, you know what I mean? Or maybe you can't get someone that you want back. I think it plays into, like, I used to really not like it in RPGs when they would split the party up, and 6 does this
a lot.
Because it's like, no, I like this guy. I want to play as this guy, not like these people. And now I have to beat this little section to go back to see what's going on with those people. I think some later games have done a better job of that. Like, I think 9, especially how the beginning works in that game, and with the, what do they call them? The active time, the cutscene.
Oh, that time events. Yeah.
Quick time events.
Yeah, where you can just hit the button if you want and see what's going on somewhere else.
Which I don't know why anybody would not hit the button.
I know. You're just like, screw those guys. Like,
if you're doing a speed run, I guess. But it's like,
maybe
anytime it's like, oh, look what's happening here. I never once like ignored that and then missed.
That's true, actually. That's a good point. But yeah, like, I feel like there's people that just don't jive with their hand being forced that way, because you're used to in a game just getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and then you're so strong at the end, and when they take things from you, I think it adds value. I think it makes you realize what you had, and then there's something to be said for the exploration element too. Like, you've explored the whole world, you know where everything is, right? You've been like pretty much everywhere. And then all of a sudden, it's a hard reset, and it's like, oh crap! But I love that stuff. I love being able to explore again. But similar to you, Mike, the first time I played the game, I was just like, what the crap? Like, when it got to that stage, I lost a lot of interest for a little while. Like, I was rolling, and I hit that point, and it was just so daunting, because you know what needs to be done, and it can seem so overwhelming that it's like, holy crap! Like, it would be like knowing that you're playing, which does happen now, but it'd be like knowing you're playing an 80-hour RPG at the beginning of the RPG. Like, there's something to be said for not really knowing how long
it is.
And sometimes, and that's probably a personality thing. There's probably some people that don't respond well to being like, here's your giant to-do list, versus like the linear experience. But I still feel like I did enjoy the game up to that point better than after that point. And that's just for me personally.
I agree.
Yeah, that's the point where I stopped playing games, like most games, when things like that happen. But the way I see, I'm trying to pick apart exactly why. I don't know why kind of the balance got a little bit messed up. And looking at it in terms of, there's World of Balance and World of Ruin, but if you look at it in terms of like order versus chaos, or structure versus like mystery, or something that's unknown, right? And a lot of games will do this, where you'll have your linear aspects of the game be at the beginning, and then it opens up towards the end, and you can kind of do whatever you want. But that's a little bit, on the order chaos scale, that's a little bit on the chaos side of things, because you can do whatever you want. No one's telling you what to do. Everything's available to you. And
get all the gold tollers.
Yeah, no, just whatever you want. Yeah, and that's fine, except when you're not being directed, it is essentially chaos, especially when there's so many things that you could do. And specifically when it comes to, like, in Link to the Past, when all of a sudden it's the dark world, and you're this little like bunny rabbit, and you're trying to, you don't know what's going on, but it's kind of the same world, right? We're looking at a similar situation. A lot of games do this. And the chaos comes in the fact that you really don't know what to do next. And that didn't happen very often throughout the whole game, right? And like you can go anywhere, right? And it's like you kind of know what to do, but you don't. You can do it in your own order. You can do it however you want to do it, right? But there's a lot that's daunting about that.
That's a good comparison to Link to the Past, actually.
Yeah, I think it actually is, especially because in Link to the Past you've got to go to all of the you essentially go to the whole map.
You think that was the whole game?
And it's a good game, right? It's a good 8-hour game, 6 hours. How long does it take?
I don't know.
Anyways, it's a good game at that point. Now let's fight the boss. But it's like, no, you've got to go back through the whole world again in this whole different way now. And eventually you figure out how things work. You got the mirror. But at first, yeah, it's really daunting. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But anyways, the order chaos thing, and a lot of open world games tend towards like a world of ruin, right? Like games like Breath of the Wild or Fallout or I don't know, games where it's like the reason you can go anywhere is because there is no structure, and the reason there's no structure is because everything's blown up, right? It's just it just fits the narrative because you're already in this point of chaos. You're in this, you know, like what is chaos? It's things that you don't know, things that are mysterious, and when you don't know where you are or what's going on, that, you know, puts you in that mental state. So, and it makes sense people would shy away from that, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not comfortable not knowing what you should do next or whatever.
Exactly, it's really uncomfortable.
Not having like a distinct goal in mind.
And in the end, you feel really accomplished when all's said and done, right? But it takes a while to get there, and that's why so many games, and honestly, sometimes the best part of games come in the order, you know, doing things in order, having a linear game, because things are flowing. You know, the game directors can direct the flow of the game and match, you know, the pace of, you know, the revelation of content and things really effectively. But once all of a sudden it's up to you and you're determining the flow of the game and you're determining the pace, some people aren't very good at it, and they end up wasting a lot of time doing the wrong things or being inefficient. And then they think it's the game's fault, and in some ways it is. Yeah. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that I've learned recently is a little bit more common than I had originally thought. I thought everybody liked it, Final Fantasy VI. I almost had never heard anyone say anything bad about it.
It does make sense.
Growing up, especially.
This is every Final Fantasy ever, though. All Final Fantasies, in my mind, I'm gonna get hate for saying this, but in my mind, they all like fall apart towards the end because they become crazy. Like the game just completely changes towards the end of the game. Like specifically, like I just played act, right. 8, Final Fantasy 8 and 9 again with my wife recently, and 10 after having beaten 12. So in the past few months, I've essentially beaten 4 Final Fantasy games, and they all do the same thing. They get weird, they get trippy weird, like drug trip. Like we're in the middle of the nothingness of the, you know, like outer space,
Space Odyssey.
Yeah, like Space Odyssey 2001, and it's just crazy. And it's like, all right, now let's fight the boss. But where are we? What is happening? Especially Final Fantasy 8, dude. That was it was weird. But Final Fantasy games have a track record for just getting into this weird like post-existential like philosophy in their video games, like fighting just get really strange.
The embodiment of like fate or destiny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people always joke that you're killing God or whatever, but in a lot of these games, you know, that's essentially what's happening, and it's crazy, and you don't know where you are, and you don't know what's happening, and there's weird colors, and you're basically in outer space, and it's just like they all kind of do this. And so it does make sense that people would maybe have a slight aversion to that. And yeah, 6 isn't much of an exception, but
yeah, I think that's a very fair thing to say. And I think that like basically post Final Fantasy VII, they almost tried to top themselves.
Yes,
every time.
Absolutely.
12 is an exception to that, but 12 gets kind of weird for different reasons at the end. It's not as like ludicrous, like brain trip insane at the end.
That's true. It's in that big machine, and yeah, that one makes a little more sense.
I think thematically it changes in quite a large way towards the end. It just you have this big shift at the end of the game, and I think that actually I feel that this actually started in Xenogears. I think really? Xenogears is where this really, really became popular for JRPGs, is like this just absolute gut mind-wrenching twist that like, what the heck? No way. And like all JRPGs like wanted to do that after that. I mean, I know to a large extent Final Fantasy VII does it, but I don't think it gets quite as crazy until you get to 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, 8, 9, and 10 are probably the worst offenders.
Yeah.
8 is the worst offender. 9 is also strange. 10 sort of makes sense because you go into that thing and at the end, and I don't know. None of 10 really makes sense to me. I haven't really played 10-2 yet, I suppose. But the whole dream aspect of the game, I
want to bring this up because this is actually because I had lots of discussions on Final Fantasy X when I was prepping for the review, and my first, my trend back then with the discussion videos was like, oh, I'll be super critical in the first one, then everyone will come at me, and I'll learn a bunch of cool stuff that I wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have said anything if I was all nice about it, and then after that, I'll adapt. So I was real harsh about that sort of thing. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what the fetch?
Right.
Okay. So the dream of the faith. Okay. Yes. Tell me if it makes sense to you if we call it this instead. The summoning of the faith.
Hold on a sec.
Not a dream, but a summoning.
Yeah. Yeah,
does
that makes
that
a lot
not
more
change?
sense.
Does that not change the whole concept for you?
Yeah, that completely changes it. That makes freaking perfect sense.
That's what it is. It's not a dream. It's a summoning.
So it's part of. Yeah. Oh wow. So it's part of the whole process.
Yes. See, that's all it took. That's all it took for me to get it. It's just changing the terminology. Instead of saying dream, I'm thinking about an abstract, non-existent sort of,
and
like,
that totally makes sense because of the way that the thing, what do they call it? The bad guy, the nothing. What do they call it? The big monster. That's
Sin.
You think it's Sin? I played the game in Japanese, so it was Shin. Well, Japanese audio. But that whole thing, the way it like sucks everything in. Anyways, okay, we can talk about this later because I don't want to get into spoiler stuff. But that actually makes a lot of sense.
It just changed my entire outlook of the game. It changed my whole outlook of the game. Completely fetched me when I was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. Got it.
That actually, it's cooler now. Just thinking about that, it's actually a cooler concept now, and it ties in a lot better.
Yep.
There must have been something about that time period, like you're saying, Mike, because I remember one of the first anime that I got way into was Trigun. And
that one gets weird at the end.
It gets nuts.
Yeah, it gets weird.
It gets nuts. But I remember watching, seeing the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles.
Oh yeah,
and being like, oh, it's the freaking same thing. I don't want to ruin like two things for anyone but rude, spoil two things at once. But I was like, what? It was the same idea. And but you wouldn't look at Trigun as a series, be like, I'm interested in this. It's like a Western-ish kind of thing with some tech, and this guy's this crazy wanted guy for some reason. You would have no idea where it was going. You would have no idea what their third act was going to be, what it was going to entail. It must have been something in Japanese media at the time that was really like. Actually, I know one. I mean, this isn't the same thing, but like Evangelion really was pretty influential for that era as well, especially on the mech type stuff. But I don't know. It must have been something in the water. I mean, they're still weird. They're still weird.
I really, I don't know. It was just like it caught on. That sort of like idea of like, we'll just flip the whole thing on its head at the end.
Wait, dude,
was real popular.
Oh my gosh! No, I get the summoning now. I get the summoning. I get the whole thing now. Like,
I know it makes perfect sense if you just trade the word "dream" for "summon." It makes complete sense after that.
That's what a summoning is. Yeah,
that's what it is.
You got to see it.
Complete and perfect sense. Just switching out two words. Wow. And that's the issue I have with FF10. I don't know, because in Japanese, you played in Japanese, didn't you? Did they call it the dream?
Inoru. They called it the prayer of the faith. So they said Inoru is. It was in the English I was reading it.
I guess prayer.
But
could
the word
be,
they were saying was Inori.
That could be more like summoning, prayer and summoning versus prayer and dream. So
the
terminology was confusing from the start, and it's just that one word evokes a different idea than another for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Even though it's not really like dream and summon. I mean, it's not that different of a concept really, but like just intuitively it is. Intuitively it is. When you think about a dream, it's like that's not real. But when you think about summoning in a game, you're making something real.
See, because that's what I had felt when I played the game. I was like, oh, that wasn't real. Like, we should put a spoiler or something or other. I'm sorry.
I'll put a
title, so I should be sympathetic to that. Yeah, put like a text, something or other, because, anyways, it's just now I don't have the feeling that it wasn't real, and you're right, that nails it on the head. That's what brings it together.
It's just if only one thing could have been changed in the English localization of Final Fantasy X, is just switch the word dream for prayer or summoning, and bam, makes perfect sense. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they misled you. It has to do with the fact of what English people intuitively associate the word dream with. That's the only issue. It's just a cultural association with the word dream. That's it.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
So that's our discussion on Final Fantasy VI World of Ruin versus World of Balance.
Oh my gosh.
Moving on. Captain Awesome asks, when have you walked away from a game never to return to it? Did you regret it? What caused that decision? Were you ever really disappointed by a game that was nearly universally praised? Okay, I'm actually going to give this a very recent example. And I have not actually done this for good, unless it's like something that was legitimately bad, like something that sucked, like Load Runner 64, like freaking Quest 64. If it's like just like from the ground up, like this is just a terrible game on every level, like I'll walk away from it. But if we're talking about, and this is kind of why I wanted to add the last part there, which was actually from a different question on a different video, were you ever disappointed by a game that was near universally praised? I kind of want to talk about games that I've wanted to walk away from that were seen as really good by most other people, or people, who suggested that I play it or whatever. Okay, on the weekend, I finished Nier Automata.
Oh, nice. I saw you tweeted about that.
Yeah. My goodness, did I hate that game for the most part.
You mean you finished it, like you beat it all 5 times or however many?
Yeah, I got all, well, there are actually a bunch of joke and endings and stuff like that.
Right, so, where you like delete your system on accident.
Yeah, and it's like you'll leave when you're supposed to do, anyways, there's a lot of joke endings, but there's like 5 like sort of like legitimate endings, right? So the A, B, C, D, and E endings. So I got all of those. I got all those endings. So, geez, where do I even start? Let's just keep it simple and pass it back and forth. I could say that I was on the border of like strong distaste to hate Nier Automata, and it had to do with making me replay a lot of the same events as 9S. It had to do a lot with gameplay, like structure and design choices, not so much hating the ideas, but just like, why did you do it this way? There's a lot of very damaged, spongy type enemies and bosses where it's not, I don't feel challenged. I just feel like this is wasting my time. A lot of things I could go into depth. I won't. I'll spare you because we get to the end where I loved the ending. The ending really just like made me reflect. It made me think about things. I got on immediately and started looking at videos that were sort of breaking the game down and analyzing it, talking about a lot of the philosophy that sort of inspired the game. Very similar actually to Xenogears in that way. A lot of Nietzschean philosophy, but also like Pascal. There's actually characters named after, philosophers.
Nice.
So there's a lot there to digest, and there's a lot there to think about. And one angle even that I hadn't really thought of was a cultural difference with sort of like the Japanese, I don't want to say obsession, but infatuation with robots, like robotics, and having like this emotional tie to a robot. Rather, those dog robots that were really popular in Japan.
You're talking about.
Yep.
So they had like replacement parts for those. People would go and get them fixed for a while, but those are starting to, they haven't been manufactured in forever. And so a lot of these robots, they just don't operate anymore. They actually have freaking like funerals, like funeral services for these robots.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going like, that's freaking weird. But there is some kind of cultural like root in this idea of like having strong, powerful emotional ties to robots. And some of that is, you know, incorporated into the game, which is a very cultural thing. Maybe was lost on me a little bit. Anyways, the reason I bring this up is because I try very, very hard these days, having experienced this now probably 4 or 5 times with games like Resident Evil 4, Final Fantasy 5, and 6 for that matter. Many, many games that I've played where I was just like, I'm not into this. I don't like it. Stepped away, came back, finished it, and ended up really, really liking it. And so I came this close to quitting Nier Automata about a week and a half ago, and I was like, I am not having fun playing this game. It's making me like visibly upset. I'm yelling at the game while I'm playing it. This is not good. Like, I shouldn't be worked up like this. It's not like, I should just avoid it. But I step back from that and I say, you know what, like, get your personal feelings out of the way and just try to turn on your analytical mind and try and understand why people like this and beast through it, see what happens. And I'm glad that I did, because it has really changed my outlook on the game. I think on a replay, expecting some of those things that I wasn't the biggest fan of, I would probably be able to be, okay, this part's coming, prepare for it, like, just get through it, and then really delve into stuff that I missed, you know? And so, for me, well, let me pass this to you guys first before I continue, because I've been talking for a long time. Are there any games where you've had similar experiences to where you want to walk away?
Well, I want to say, playing off what you were just talking about, I don't ever anticipate playing Nier Automata just because it's just not high enough on my priority list. So I went and read the plot synopsis for it. I was like, why is everyone pumped about this?
Yeah.
And obviously that's not going to ever be the same.
Right.
It never will. Like, I've read the plot. I do that with movies that I'm not actually interested in ever seeing. I'll be like, what's it about? I did that with that Will Smith movie, 7 Pounds. What was that one called? Came out a few years ago. Anyways, I do it. I don't do it very often, but I do it when I definitely know I'm never going to experience that piece of media. But I'm still curious enough to spend 10 minutes reading that.
Yeah.
And I read the plot synopsis, and I was like, okay. So from reading that, I don't feel like I completely understood why people were so pumped about the game, because my Twitter timeline was just full of people going nuts about how great the game is, and when the game came out. And so it must be something more presentation wise, especially the ending or something, because as I read it, I was like, okay. You know,
that's so funny.
So
I'll get back to that in a minute, because I have something
but
to do.
that's like a total tangent. There's some games that I like tried to play a couple times and never finished, like one of those Final Fantasy VIII. Partly because I never owned the game, so like I probably would have finished if I owned it. But quite often, you know, growing up, you borrow a game from a friend, right? And it's like, you could only keep it for so long. Before it's like, I want my game back. And so, you know, there's a lot of those games but I don't buy games that I'm not interested enough in nowadays to like actually want to see through. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, if I'm paying for a game, I'm going to freaking see what it's about, you know? And
sure.
So I don't have very many examples personally for when I've walked away from a game that a bunch of other people have enjoyed.
Yeah, and I guess that would be the caveat. I've walked away from a lot of games like RuneScape, but that game's literally endless, so I don't know if that really counts.
You have to walk away from it.
You have to eventually. It doesn't end. It ends when you decide that it's over. So anyways, there's things like Call of Duty or online games that, you know, take a lot of time. There are points, though, where it all, you know, I think about not playing at some point. It all culminates to some event happening, and then I'm just like, screw it, I'm done, you know, and that happens a lot. As far as individual games, though, there are certain games that I stopped playing because they were too hard. Here's one. Oh, people may not like this, though. Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Yeah, I'm never going to actually beat.
Is that the Game Boy Advance version?
The second one, not the Game Boy Advance version, the PS1 version. So
the one
the same game.
With the card battle system.
Yes, with the card battle system.
Yeah.
And some people have talked about how, just play until you get this one certain card that regenerates and that you use it over and over, and it just makes the game really easy. I don't know. I just stopped. I stopped playing it, and I've watched like the movies and the cutscenes and all of that stuff, but I have not actually beaten that game because I don't like it. I don't like the gameplay. And a lot of people do like it. They feel like the cards added some depth. The cards added randomness, that's for sure, which I don't typically like in games. But I don't think the cards do much. I don't think cards do anything beneficial for the battle system. So,
yeah. Touching back on what you were saying, Landon, with looking up the synopsis, the story synopsis, and how that never really gives you quite the right idea of what it's all about. I've actually done that a lot. One, because I typically tend to not care a lot about spoilers. I care more about how the story's executed in context. Not that I'm like, yeah, just spoil every game for me or every movie. Sure. Like I don't want it to be spoiled necessarily, but I don't take umbrage with if I'm interested in knowing where this is going. Say I'm watching a television show or something where it has like it's like a lot of episodes. It's like, okay, where's this going? Am I going to keep watching this? Reading ahead and seeing what's going to happen a little bit. I do that sometimes, not all the time, sometimes. Anyways, what I've noticed is that when I've done that, and then it's like, okay, let me go back and watch that. It's like, that's not really... I mean, basically that's right. But, like, that does not give the sense very well, like, what that actually meant. And that's why I tend to not care about spoilers, because the fact that I knew what was going to happen, I still watched it in context, and I was like, oh, wow, that's actually really cool. Whereas before I'd been like, oh, I don't know why people think that's super cool twist, or why. But then watching it's like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And I felt that way about Nier Automata, because I did that. I wanted to quit playing, but I wanted to know what happens in the story and why everyone loves that latter portion of the game so much. So I read it, and I was like, and from the beginning, I didn't think Nier Automata's plot was really that groundbreaking or cool. And I still actually agree with you on your interpretation of reading that wiki, synopsis or whatever. It's like, it wasn't hooking me even nearly enough to keep me interested to push through the gameplay decisions and design that I was not a fan of. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to quit. But then I was on the Patreon streams talking to other people. They were being like, no, please, like, you gotta push through it. Other people were like, fine, you can drop it or whatever, but like, this is what we liked about it. And they talked to me about it, and I was like, oh, F, I will just, because I just had so many experiences where I've done this. I quit playing Resident Evil 4. I was like, I hate these controls. They suck. And then I went and talked to a friend who was like, dude, just trust me. Like, you'll get used to it. It's an awesome game. And I go back and play it. It's an awesome game. And I'm like trying to share with all my friends. I've had so many experiences like that I knew that I couldn't just leave the game like that. So what I think it came down to was the style. Like, the style of Nier Automata is actually pretty phenomenal if you're into that Yoko Taro's kind of style. But the stylistic, like, impact and the way that a lot of that stuff is delivered really changes the context of it, not from the sense that, like, oh, the idea is now has more depth or is cooler, but just like it hits you emotionally a little bit differently when you're seeing the way it impacts the characters versus just understanding like the concept or idea behind it, right? So that portion of it, the way that was executed toward the climax and the end of the game was actually quite phenomenal, and it made me go, like, especially for a game that is about robots and androids, and I felt that there was a human element that was missing from a lot of it, which is intentional. It's about robots, but that changes toward the end of the game with a certain character, and I don't want to spoil too much, but like I started to feel really connected and to the human element there, and that really is when it started changing for me, my perception. There's also a number of events that happened just in the last maybe 5 hours that were pretty fascinating, and the way that they took robots and made me feel connected emotionally to them was actually pretty impressive. And then when I further looked into how, you know, the Japanese view robots and stuff like that, and I felt like he had successfully, right at the end, had successfully sort of like given me a taste of what it's kind of like for Japanese people to get into their robots, you know, and do funerals for them and stuff. I thought that was kind of cool. And so, like, totally changed my perspective. Now, I don't expect most people or even anyone to want to punish themselves by making themselves play through something they don't like in order to sort of get it, so to speak. I know that the last part of this question, it was in relation to the fact that he was not a big fan of Secret of Mana. He played Secret of Mana for the first time, and he just really, really was not feeling it. And he goes over some of his reasons. I didn't copy them here, and I kind of forgot a little bit. It has to do with the fact that he felt like it became kind of grindy towards the end. Had to do a lot of stuff he wasn't like super into, just to kind of push forward, and he didn't think the storytelling was all that great to begin with. But I think, well, let me focus this a little bit more. The reason why I generally tend to want to walk away from games, as most people know who watch our podcast, I really enjoy good stories, and when the storytelling is not doing it for me, I start to lose interest unless the gameplay systems are really, really tight, really, really good. And in games where they have a lot of RNG, in games where there's a lot of time that you have to waste doing repetitive sort of, tasks, if bosses feel like their level of difficulty was raised just by giving them tons and tons and tons of HP, those things tend to frustrate me a lot. And those were some of the things I wasn't super happy about with Nier. And but I don't know really I'm going with this, other than Nier is actually pretty cool. If you stick with it to the end.
If you just stick with it.
If you didn't like Secret of Mana, I played Seiken Densetsu 3, which is the sequel to that game, first, and I think it's actually significantly improved in almost every way, maybe except for music. It's on the same level, but I don't know. That's just my answer as to like why I get frustrated with games.
Yeah, Secret of Mana, Secret of Mana does fall apart a bit towards the end, but
you know, this is super random, but Secret of Mana and Link to the Past are freaking almost the exact same game, with just very, very, not story-wise, but I mean some parts, but with very, very minor tweaks to like the mechanics of like the approach to the genre. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
It's like,
yeah.
I was looking at some Secret of Mana stuff again about a month ago, but it's amazing how like on paper it can seem like the same thing, but in practice it can be like so different. Kind of like how you're saying, Mike, like you read the plot synopsis for something, but then in practice, more of it, the devil's in the details with that stuff. Yeah, I know. Exactly. It makes me wonder with things like because let's see if I can say this. There are parts of it that reminded me of the Matrix, like more of the later Matrix movies, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking like, I wonder if there's still some cool idea, because obviously like some of that stuff is working for people in this format, and I almost wonder if like presentation wise, the Wachowskis screwed up what they had with the later Matrix movies. They could have presented it in a more compelling manner where people would actually care more about the concepts, because I think sometimes when you get really, really out there with like some kind of create like interesting philosophical ideas, but things that are less like easy for a human to relate to, I think it's really easy to lose people. So if you can balance those and still be impactful with these really abstract concepts, I think that's a pretty great accomplishment. So I think like the Wachowskis did a great job with the first Matrix, but not with the follow-ups, and so like with Platinum and Yoko Taro pulling stuff off with Nier Automata, then I mean, props to them. That's pretty awesome that they're able to figure out a way how to make some of that stuff work.
Yeah, the fact that you brought up the Matrix is really interesting, because I think that, earlier we were talking about what influenced JRPGs to sort of develop in the way that they did, and Xenogears, I think plot construction and the big twist and certain elements there, I think the Matrix style-wise, like, hardcore influenced JRPGs.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like, absolutely.
Well, and the Matrix was influenced pretty heavily from Japanese
that's
manga
true.
to begin with. Yeah. So there's kind of a cross, exchange of ideas between the two cultures that happened around that point. Yeah. For
sure. Anyways,
which could be seen as cultural appropriation. Depending on, how offended you want to be about things.
All I know is
I feel like it was beneficial. Cultural
the freaking little Matrix Animatrix short that Square Enix did was terrible. It's freaking whack. Not terrible. The animation was good for the time, but it's just a weird idea. They're just cutting each other's clothes off. I was not a fan of that.
Yeah, I thought something cool was going to happen.
That's all it is. I mean, it's just a movie about characters cutting each other's clothes off.
That was back when people were still impressed with like sort of real looking humans in anything. So
any CG.
That didn't go anywhere, man. Not for the anime or feature length films, anyways.
My favorite one was the one where like there were those gravity anomalies that the kids were running across.
Yeah, that was sweet.
That was awesome.
Yeah, with the kids, and they're like exploring that abandoned building or something.
Yeah,
yeah, that was cool. I really like the private investigator.
I really liked the idea of the Animatrix. It sort of reminded me a little bit of if you've ever read the novel I Am Robot, where it's like just a ton of different short stories that sort of like all come together in this just amazing science fiction conglomerate.
Yeah.
I wish there were more things like that. That was like a more commonly accepted like structure for.
It's more like how poems or a book of poems, where it's a bunch of vignettes of different things.
Yeah, there's more of that in sci-fi than in
for sure.
Like there's not as much of that in fantasy. If people write story in fantasy, they want it to be a long story.
It's an epic.
Sci-fi, there's a lot of shorts.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on here. Fingers 998. Do you think that the presence of online guides and the temptation to look at them can worsen the experience of playing the games these guides are for? For example, the mystery of discovering the secrets in a game, or the satisfaction of working out a puzzle in a game, or finding out spoilers. He gives an example here. The secret areas in Crash Bandicoot 2 that without a guide you would otherwise have to find yourself, but then in finding them you get that awesome wow feeling, that satisfaction of discovering something that sometimes feels like something you aren't supposed to find. Another example is Final Fantasy XII's quests that lead to, or the quest that led to fighting the Chaos Esper, finding those 3 medallions scattered around the world.
Yeah.
Kason, I think, is a good one to talk about this. You don't like looking stuff up before.
I hate it. I'll start this one off. I don't like it. I don't like it because I feel like it does. I feel it does worsen the experience of playing games. But I don't know. It kind of depends on the game. If you have a game like Pokemon and it's like one of the goals of beating the game is catching all 151 Pokemon, do what you can, and then I have no issues with that. Like, we used a guide the first playthrough of Ocarina of Time. We used a guide to find all the Skulltulas, right?
Yeah, we used it for.
We didn't use the guide for a ton of things. It was mostly just a cool art book, right? But the Skulltulas is like that's like game supplementing material, right? But I believe knowing things, and this Mike talked about his take on spoiler kind of things. My take is knowing things ahead of time destroys the flow of the game, and the director is trying to reveal information at a certain pace, and by doing, you kind of turn things around when you know things when he doesn't want you to know things yet, right? And that's just kind of like more or less what I bring up when I'm talking about that. I want the experience the director had crafted for me in the way that, and revealing information is really big. It's a huge part of storytelling. And when you've got these games, I mean, if it's like a puzzle, like, I don't know, I'm kind of both ways on this nowadays. I think you should do it yourself. I think the game was designed for you to do it yourself. And if it's too hard, maybe, I don't know, that can be frustrating, but the game was made that way, and that is the game, right? Like, if a book gets too hard to read, you can just turn to Cliff's Notes and find out, does that even exist anymore?
Yeah, no,
that was back like 20 years ago.
They still have those at Barnes & Noble.
Okay, sweet. You can turn to, you know, and if the words are too big, I can't read all these words, I'm using a dictionary, and let me just find out, you know, get to through this chapter on Cliff's Notes or something. It's hard to compare it to other media, I guess, but that is kind of what I would equate it to, is that you're having a trouble, like J.R. Tolkien wrote too many poems, and so rather than reading his poems in the book, you just kind of skip them, or and you can do that, and that can help. That can be beneficial sometimes. I'm kind of just like circular here with this. I don't know, because I also played Vagrant Story recently, and Vagrant Story has a lot of puzzles, a lot of rooms you get into, and there's boxes, and it takes a while to find out what exactly to do, and the puzzles are very well put together, but some of them I don't know, one in particular was kind of difficult for me. And so I actually did turn to a guide just to get through it, because the whole point of me playing Vagrant Story was just for the story. And I had decided that I decided ahead of time, I'm going to use a guide for this game, because, or not for the whole game, but just for, like, if I run into something, I'm not going to let it kill me. Because Vagrant Story is the kind of game I would stop playing, because I got stuck somewhere and it got too hard and I just stopped playing. So guides, to me, is a mechanism to, when you want to stop playing, you can at least just keep playing and finish the game and get the story, if that's what you care about. But I'm a bit of a purist in the sense that I think you should do everything you can do yourself. Back when we were a kid, that was harder. Now that we're adults, I feel like it's doable. And that I feel like it's like respecting the art form of crafting a video game, as letting it challenge you and not giving into the challenge and just to get past it because you didn't like it, right? But, you know, respecting the art form for what it is, and you know, accepting the way the game was designed, and playing it the way that the game director wanted you to play it, so as to have the proper flow. That's probably the best way I could sum it up.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. I think that just to add on to that, especially with the way, like, the history of games, I think the cryptic, like, just immensely cryptic nature of so much from especially early, like, NES games, like, just like, what the F am I supposed to do here?
Yeah, and the intentionally cryptic nature, yeah.
Right. Sometimes I think it possibly was, and sometimes I think it might have been limitations with how much dialogue they were allowed to put in the text boxes.
That's a fair point.
Especially for Japanese, which is, you can write a lot more in the text box than you can in English. And so I think a lot of times it's like they're trying to get it in to fit in there, but, like, they just can't give you the same context or the same amount of information. And so it can be like, oh man, like, I'm just totally confused by this. So sometimes I believe you're right where it's intentional, and sometimes it's not. And this also comes down to one thing I would like to, I don't know if you can, but it would be interesting to find out, is because there are a lot of people that are into 100% completing their games. It's like, I'm do everything in the game. But I really wonder how many people who do that don't look at guides at all. They 100% the game completely on their own, and they do that for multiple games, all the games they play. I really question that. I really question that.
And if you really like 100%ing games, like, what, especially as it comes to the mundane, just collect this many things, do this just so that you can say you did it. Why even do that if you're just going to use a guide and just copy robotically what somebody wrote down, and you do it? And, like, and maybe it's just my personality, but I don't see the fulfillment in 100%ing a game and using a guide. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like, for instance,
I question that too.
The Skulltulas, right? Like, as an example, like, is there really a sense of satisfaction in saying, someone told me how to get all the things. It's like, oh, I did it, but
yeah,
did you do it really? I don't think so. So
yeah,
but especially with trophy systems and achievements in like today's age, and we've talked about the addictive nature of that, potentially, you know, just being able to see the 100% complete mark next to a game and then do it for the next one.
And getting some fulfillment out of that, yeah.
Out of that, you know, versus, I think that that you make a good point in saying that, you know, as much as possible, it makes more sense to try and experience the thing as the artist intended for you to experience it without knowing information or whatever. But I do think a lot of games are very badly designed. Even good games have a lot of really bad design decisions in them.
I can't argue with that.
So, and they're much larger in scope. You know, we talked about this a little bit with dialogue. You know, maybe some dialogue in games suffers just because there's so much more and there's so much more room for error. Movies are much shorter, and so like games being so long, there's going to be something in there that just didn't get the attention, possibly that it needed. So, due to that, is the frustrating you're feeling with a puzzle really the intention of the developer, or was it like an oversight? And in that case, does it justify not sitting there spinning your wheels over something that wasn't communicated well enough, when you want to just get to a part that had more attention given to it,
right?
And it's a little bit better executed. So, I mean, I use guides quite often for things like, oh, here's the other part too, is a lot of times just complete BS. Like you don't know how to get a specific, I'll use I Am Setsuna as an example. There's a Sprite Knight I wanted to get. Now, the way you get Sprite Knight, that's kind of like the abilities in the game, like the techs. The way that you get them is you have to sell materials you get from monsters. So you kill monsters, they drop materials, you sell those materials to the Magic Consortium, and once you've sold all of the types of materials that are required for a Sprite Knight, you can then get that Sprite Knight. So there are certain materials I was like, how do I get that? I don't have, there's no mechanism within the game. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe somebody will, hold on, I gotta freaking close, I'm getting a lot of messages on Discord because of my discussion video, so I got to close it out so that it doesn't keep popping up in the middle of the podcast.
Nice.
Maybe there is a method, and somebody. I'm not a detail person in some areas of my life, and others I'm better, and others I'm not. So maybe there is like a bestiary or something in the game that will tell you this is where you get this material. But as far as I could tell, with the limited time that I have to play games right before going to bed at night, I had no idea how the fetch I was supposed to find that material in order to get that Sprite Knight, which was like a Tier 2 Sprite Knight or something like that. So I got online, I was like, how do I get this thing? And it said you have to do an overkill, or it was a debuff kill or something like that. You have to use a debuff on an enemy and then kill it in order for that to be dropped. It's like things of that nature that are that granular. It's like the only way to get this thing is to kill this in a very specific way in this specific kind of enemy. Unless that stuff is like very clearly delivered, or you have a place you can go where they'll explain that to you, I can see that as being more of frustration that it's worth to figure out on your own.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. I mean, it's funny because there are always things like that. I mean, we talked last week or two about how a director for a video game is so different from a film director, and how they're doing so much more than what a film director typically does, and they have such different responsibilities. It's really easy to oversee certain things. But when I talk about just like respecting video games as an art form, in some ways it does seem like certain games or the way certain things were made aren't exactly deserving of that respect, and like something gets broken. Like, what would you call it? The unwritten contract between the video game player and the video game maker gets broken when something like that happens. And that's where trust, like you're saying, this happens in a lot of games. And I feel like there's maybe like a trust issue with just video games in general, and because you should be able, I don't know. Like, you wouldn't argue with that statement, right? Like, you should be able to beat a game without a guide, right?
I would hope so. That would be better.
That's
that would be the ideal situation.
And I agree with you that not all games, in fact, maybe very few games actually achieve that goal. But I think that should be the goal, that you should not have to use a guide to beat a game, because otherwise, like, there just isn't going to be the trust between the consumer and the producer that I think needs to be there for video games to be a respectable art form, I guess.
That's where trust is interesting, because I've heard game developers, other podcasts and things talk about respecting the player's time. So, like, as a game developer, it's very easy to make things really hard. It's very easy to do that.
Right.
And so it's more a matter of tuning things and sometimes almost scaling it back. Where should this be? And obviously, like, there's so many different kinds of games out there. There's shooters where the difficulty is like you just physically can't do what you need to do next because you're overwhelmed and you need to get headshots on all these, you know. But then that's usually where they'll have difficulty sliders, difficulty modes that you can choose, like yourself going in to a game, and sometimes that can affect some of that. But some of these things, I feel like there's an idea of beating a video game where it's like I did everything, or like I found all the secrets, or I guess like a completionist perspective. And then there's an idea of just like I just played it and I got out of it what I got out of it.
Right.
And I feel like most games, at least historically, have been designed more for you get what you get out of it, but there is extra stuff there in case you want more. Like a great example is like most Mario games, right? Most Mario games have like you beat the level, sweet, you beat it. You didn't do everything. Right. You didn't get these coins.
You just got to the end.
You just got to the end.
Yeah.
And you didn't die. But that extra layer is there as an optional thing. I'm going to come back. I'm going to really dig in. And that's where things like guides come in. That's where, that extra layer of challenge for people who want that. So you make a game that doesn't have to have a difficulty slider. You've got your one difficulty, but if people want more, yeah, sure, they can try and figure out a way to get that coin that's like looks like you would fall to your death if you went for it, that kind of thing. But that's hard to do. I think that's a little bit hard to like be that, I guess, creative or that innovative with like what you've created out of your rule set and your systems for your game. And so I think that guides come out of a place. First off, guides would exist if games were easy. Like people want to make them. Like we made them growing up. It was a fun thing to do. So I think a lot of guides exist because people are just like, I'm going to make a guide. It sounds like a blast. And there's some satisfaction from people learning from you. And like Mike has guides on this channel.
Like Dark Souls and
Final Fantasy 7 and stuff. It's like for the people who make those kinds of things, it's there's some satisfaction there. So guides are going to exist whether games are hard or not. To me, it's and so I personally don't usually use them. Recently I finally beat Breath of the Wild, by the way.
You beat it.
Finally beat it.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say. And I used a guide for a couple shrines at the end.
I got all 120 shrines. But I had to use a guide for the last 3 that I couldn't find.
Yeah,
because
that sounds about right for me too.
I put freaking. I was looking on the Switch thing. It was like 200 something hours into the game already. Yeah, I was like, oh my,
just beat it. Just beat it.
Well, it was just like I felt like I had put more than reasonable effort. I was like, this is bullcrap, dude. Like, but it reminded me that. Because there was that talk, that GDC talk, I think it was, with the developers of Breath of the Wild. And they said, how do you develop a game that works in a world where people can just show people like the solutions to everything? Like with traditional Zelda games, they can just say, here's the map of the whole dungeon, here's where all the things are. And Nintendo sells those things themselves.
Right.
How do you make a game that's still like new and exciting? And I think we can see what they thought about that. There's a lot of
multiple solutions, right?
Multiple solutions, very experiential. So like kind of like we were talking about with the plot synopsis, there's a difference between just seeing what you need to do and then like actually going through it yourself. Like there's this concept known as a illusion of competence. And it's the idea that, like, for example, if you read a chapter in a book And and when that chapter's over, if you stop and go like, okay, what was everything that just happened in that chapter? It's actually kind of hard to recall everything, right? Whatever the book may be. But if you skim through, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah. I remembered all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so sometimes it can be. I feel like there's a danger, and danger is like totally overstating it. But, if you use a guide, if you rely on a guide too early, like in a game, I think you can get to a point where you don't personally actually have mastery of like the mechanics, like the developers thought you should at a certain point. And you're using a guide, so it doesn't matter. It's not like you're going to get stuck, but you're not following that learning curve that they've designed the game around. And so I believe it's possible to maybe diminish your experience a little bit with a game. Depending on, if you know every enemy's like weakness from the first battle all the way to the last battle of the game, it's like, you probably weren't being challenged that much, but there's other ways that challenge can come into play. And so,
because a lot of a game, beating a game isn't just knowing what happens, it's experiencing what happens. And like if you already know, and it's like there's a difficulty aspect, like, oh, that's not easy. If you know the solution to all the puzzles and you know how to kill all the bosses, then the whole like, wow, that was hard aspect of the game kind of doesn't exist for you because you were able to do it in a way where you knew exactly what to do.
Yeah. Oh, and on the point of the shrines of Breath of the Wild, so what I ended up doing is I pulled up a map that just showed where all of them were, and I just like, it's about here. Okay, I'm gonna go there, and still trying to find it myself. And I was pretty pissed.
There was one that made me mad at how hidden it was.
I had already found that one.
Really?
I had already found that one.
Oh, geez,
the three that I had left were actually relatively obvious ones, but I had that thing where the hero's path where you can see where you've been. And so I was using that just like visiting areas where I just hadn't been. But a few of them were in places I had already been before, and that totally freaking like led me astray. But after I got them all, I was like, freak. Dang it, man. I was so close. And I was kind of like, I can't believe but that's kind of bullcrap because it's a freaking video game, and like, what am I gonna put that on my resume? Like, I found all the shrines by myself, I believe the design philosophy of Breath of the Wild was the playground thing, right? Where it's like kids play it, they go to school, they're like, I found this secret. What secret did you find? And they share information. Then you go back and you find that secret in your game. That's how the first Zelda kind of worked. And so like in that sense, they're designing it, assuming you are going to get information outside of the game, that it's going to inform your experience inside of the game.
So here would be a good way to sum that up. So Breath of the Wild, you can learn all about its ways in 30 hours, yet after 200 hours, it can still surprise you.
That's true.
Probably the best way I can
Twitter's that's hilarious.
But that's it though, because the game, and in that sense, it's done purposefully. You aren't actually meant to find everything as far as the game's design goes. Right. Some people accidentally stumble onto stuff, but then they tell you about it, and then you go find it.
Well, and this is okay. The next like minute, maybe minorly spoilery, but it's not plot spoilery for Breath of the Wild.
Okay, spoiler alert.
It's not. I don't even know. I just want to be careful.
What plot? Am I right?
It's
good one.
So there's additional challenge in tracking down every Hinox, every Talus, and the 4 Moldugas in the desert, and you can get medals for finding all of them, right? So it's like this additional level of, can you find all of these things? And of course, finding 4 Moldugas in a very specific area is like, bam, okay, I did it.
Yeah, totally.
Finding there's 40 Hinox,
really?
And 40 Talus around the world. So between the two of them, that's 80 specific locations that I fortunately was marking as I was playing the game. Every time I ran across one, I would like put a stamp on it. But you can only have 100 stamps. So if you're marking all of them, you're only left with 20 stamps for like other crap.
Yeah.
And which I wish you could have 200 stamps and not 100 stamps in the game, because I've stamped the crap out of my stupid man.
It's loses the free half point for not 200
stamps. Yeah, loses its free half point.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that, and the rewards for that aren't really anything. It's equivalent to an achievement. And I was thinking about that. And I was just like, that's cool. Also kind of BS, because I'm not going to bother personally at that point in the game. I'm like, okay, screw it. If I want to do those, I'm going to look up where those are and go fight.
Right.
Because
at some point you're just kind of done playing.
Well, because
game,
like,
right?
yeah, I mean, fortunately, Breath of the Wild is the kind of game
me,
where you can have some unique experiences over and over still.
Right.
But not every game is like that. And even in Breath of the Wild, you can hit a point where you're just like, I've mostly done the same thing for the past couple of hours or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. Skulltulas, the random collectible stuff. I personally am more open to using a guide for it, I guess. I would have to say. My issue with the shrines was I felt like these are what are replacing dungeons. And I felt like something about, you know, the exploration and all of that was like intrinsic in the concept of like how the shrines worked, and then that dungeon content where I would never look up how to get to a dungeon in a Zelda game previously.
Right.
I don't think I ever have. I mean, not like it's usually that difficult. They're usually
they're
pretty obvious.
But
anyways, for that, because of that parallel, I was like, I'm not just going to look up all the locations.
Yeah, I held out as long as I could, but
yeah.
At some point, it just freaking sucks. It's just like, dude, I have tried everything my brain can possibly imagine to figure this out, and you can't figure it out.
And when you can cross-reference notes with other people that have played, you know, be like, oh, have you seen the one here? What? There's one there? I didn't know that. You know, that's like,
Well, and going back to Kaysen's point about the intentions of the developers, sometimes that is the intention. They want you to talk about it socially. Yeah. They want you to come together as a community.
Because whenever people would try to talk to me about Breath of the Wild, I would like plug my ears, like don't say a word. And maybe, you know, that was a mistake. I was, you know, as far as like what I was saying before about the developers' intentions, maybe I was going against the developers' intentions by avoiding spoilers so religiously, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Well, like even going back to the Final Fantasy plot, you know, construction examples we were talking about, they've stated that Tetsuya Nomura this is on the bonus features of the Japanese Advent Children talked about how that kind of was part of, you know, a lot of what they did with storytelling was that they wanted the fans to talk about it and figure it out amongst themselves. They didn't want to, and whether you agree with this or not is one thing. I for one, I don't, but it is intentional, and you have to kind of respect the artist's intentions with that and say that they wanted you to not necessarily get the whole thing sitting down by yourself experiencing the story. They wanted you to say, wait a minute, what? And then go talk and theorize and sort of like pull together what other people think and sort of figure it out amongst themselves. So the fact that I did that with Final Fantasy X, and I went and learned that summoning and dream, those two words being switched around, changes everything. It's like, now that I'm sharing, like, that's part of the intention too. So I don't know if game facts FAQ guides are necessarily part of the intention, rarely if ever, but at least the idea that you're not always meant to figure everything out by yourself can also play a role into that. And I think
that's true.
The internet's response to that is game FAQs. So
it makes me think of Inception. You know, everyone walked away from Inception talking about like their theories. Everyone had a theory. As soon as the screen went black, okay, I think it was a dream, because, you know, everyone had one, and there's like a marketing aspect to that, right? I'm sure the developers, like, people are going to talk about this, and other people are going to hear about it that haven't already experienced it.
Yeah, and that's the real purpose of it, is people are going to talk about it, so more people have an entry point into our thing, and more people will play the game or be informed about the game or whatever, because the story will generate discussion. Feel about that how you do, but
get that Oscar buzz. A lot of buzz. Is going to win the Oscar.
Because if you finish your game too well, and if you tell too good of a story, and if you have a satisfying ending, you're actually hurting yourself in the long run, because now no one's going to talk about it.
You have Avatar. Oh, man. Avatar the movie, which nobody talks about.
Which no one talks about. Because
there's no fan theories about Avatar.
Up. Yeah, no one cares about Avatar.
They're hard done.
Apparently Disney's putting an Avatar-themed world into their parks, though. Was that Disney, or was that someone else?
I think it was Disney World.
Yeah.
Something like that.
No one cares about Avatar.
Now we're gonna get a bunch of pissed off Avatar fans.
Yeah, I don't know. James Cameron, if you're watching, like,
Oh,
we do care about Avatar, just, you know,
not enough to see 4 more of them.
Exactly, which is crazy.
One might have been
grossing movie of all time, right? Is it, or it's up there?
Is this?
It's high. It's
up
not the
there,
most,
and it's
high.
like no one cares about it. There's just something to be said about that.
Okay. Last topic here. HD Baird. What would it take for you guys to throw your hands up with games altogether or in general? Because
so all video games.
Yeah, just I'm done. I'm walking away.
I'm playing games.
I've had my fill.
Yeah.
Because with games as service, loot crates, all the nonsense with the SJW/alt-right controversies and liars being in charge of everything, I'm close to being done. If Nintendo adopts any of this toxicity, I think it could do it for me. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay, this actually is a point
interesting.
I think I've talked about in the past with Fire Emblem, right? So,
right.
There is, there can be, or there is, but I know there's more than one community for a game out there, right? I have, in my experience, tended to come across and see lots of extreme toxicity within the Fire Emblem fandom. Not to say that there aren't really good ones out there or ones that are more open, but there is a lot of it. There's a lot of it in Final Fantasy too, but for some reason I could tolerate that better. I don't know why. But with Fire Emblem in particular, I think it has to do maybe with the subject of the toxicity, which tends to be in the hatred of traditional players with the dating sim mechanics that have been brought in, and some of the people that came in as fans of that sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of controversy and infighting and nastiness in gaming communities. I literally, until I started making videos on YouTube, was oblivious to all of it. I had no idea that people hated Fire Emblem Awakening. I was very surprised to learn this. And so now when you're talking about games as service and loot crates and stuff that's in the game specifically that you take offense to or whatever, or umbrage with or something like that, that's one thing. I could see that. With the part of the question that's about all the controversies in the community surrounding these things and stuff like that. And I'll even I've used this example in the past too with Fable 2, right? You're talking about liars being in charge of things, the marketing BS that goes into trying to push the game, and the dishonesty that happens occasionally, maybe more than occasionally there. Yeah. I was not aware. I was not aware at all of what was promised in Fable 2. I just played the game as it is, and it's one of my favorite games of all time.
It's a really fun game, yeah.
I love it, but I had no expectations for it, right? I had no idea that I was supposed to be able to carve something into a tree and it would be there later on, or whatever it was he promised. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know any of that. I just played it as it was. I think, and maybe this is some level of advice I could give. If you're feeling turned off to games due to the toxicity of the community aspect, maybe just step away from the community. Don't step away from the games. Because I think a lot of games can be enjoyed when you're not aware of the controversy in the community surrounding that thing. And you just have your own opinion to go on. I enjoyed it. I had fun. This was awesome. Without having to deal with all that side of it. Now,
I think a lot of what he's referring to is how that stuff kind of makes its way into the game. Such as Final Fantasy Peasants thing about people protesting Lady Lunafreya, right? Her role in Final Fantasy 15, and
stuff they cut,
and then the company responded to it. It's not just the fact that the community didn't like certain things; it's the fact that the game literally took basically that whole character, at least half of that whole character, out of the game. Because of the controversies or something. You're talking about. I think that's what he's referring to more or less, is what the companies do in response, not the community.
But
or also
what if you're not, again, what if you're just totally unaware of that?
Keep that, very fair point. Very fair point.
Like if I never
then
knew,
you're just wondering what the heck's up with Luna Freya. Then
if I never knew that there was supposed to be some level of, a physical abuse theme with a character at all, I had no knowledge of that whatsoever. Then the expectation's not there when you go in and play it. So part of, I think, what he's talking about can be mitigated by stopping the close following of games media so closely or so much, and
except
just
this channel. Keep following this channel.
We won't make it toxic for you. Stay away from the communities. Stay away from following the game's media so closely, and some of that might actually lessen for you. When we come to loot boxes and DLC practices and microtransactions and stuff like that, that's really just a case-by-case basis, I think. I think that more and more it's becoming hard to ignore that stuff. Like in NBA 2K18, where you can't even use a hairstyle because you have to freaking get virtual currency to use the hairstyle, so you can either play the game for like 70 hours to get enough virtual currency to get that hairstyle, or you can just buy it for $5.
You can't see it on your guy until you buy it. You can't be like,
you can't test this
total BS. Total freaking BS, right? That sort of thing, you stop. When that bothers you on the level it bothered me, because that's the reason I didn't buy it. It had been a while since I had bought in a 2K basketball game, an NBA 2K game, and I was like, I think this might be the year I jump back in. And I learned about that. I was like, nope, not touching that, not supporting that whatsoever.
But it is true that more and more games are adopting the games as a service, the loot crate, the on disc DLC kind of stuff. Sure.
Yeah, it's true. And so, like, what's it going to take for me to walk away altogether? I've felt at least a semblance of this for the AAA industry. Like, there's parts of me that are becoming more and more just totally disinterested in AAA gaming altogether. But I find games like Hyper Light Drifter, and I find games like Senuous Hellblade. Hellblade, and I say that's stuff that I would never want to walk away from when there are experiences like that still out there for me to have.
Yeah. Dude, Golf Story.
Yeah, I saw you've played that quite a bit.
Really good game. And if you're stuck, if you're done with the AAA games, just play Golf Story.
There's a lot of great indie titles out there that have a lot of passion, a lot of really great ideas. And so I don't think there's anything. I can't imagine anything that would make me walk away from gaming altogether when there are so many different people who have the same ideals or they're looking to create the kinds of experiences that I want, similar. They have the same mindset that I do about game design. There's just too many people out there who want the same thing that I do, there's always going to be something to find somewhere that's going to fulfill.
I agree. And that's part of, honestly, that's capitalism, right? Like if there are likely people who think like you, and if you're not buying certain games, but you still want to play games, and you start buying indie games, which is where a lot of this stuff will move. If all the AAA decide that they want to play it super safe and be super politically correct with everything and just avoid controversy wherever it lies, or embrace it, either one, whichever one you don't like, you can always find some game developers who are bucking the trend, who are doing something else. And you can find some pretty quality stuff there. And with indie developers becoming more and more common, gosh, there are just, I don't know how many. Should I say thousands? I'll say thousands.
Lost on Steam.
I need a number. I can't just say many. There are thousands of indie games a year. Yeah, there are so many you would not believe. But yeah, there are tons of them are high quality, and you can just go there because and that was one of the things with the Switch that I was kind of like, I didn't really know what to play, and I agree with you, Mike. A lot of these AAA games don't really stick out to me anymore. I don't have a ton of interest in them, and that's why I've been playing Stardew Valley lately. That's why I've been playing I play Golf Story and games like that. Like, but I've been playing old games. I've been going back and playing the classics because I don't want to play the new games. But also, to me, those games are they're that good. They're still every bit as enjoyable. And in some cases, in the case of Stardew Valley, more enjoyable than any Harvest Moon game I've played. I don't know. You can find it. There's a market for it. That's where we live.
It's a huge industry. It's a huge industry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to look at what it sounds like a lot of what he's talking about is stuff in games, right? Loot crates and loot.
Yeah.
The thing with loot crates is like, I don't know. I don't think loot crates are a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it bothers people when everyone starts iterating on the exact same thing. Like toys to life was a big thing. Now it is not. Now it's literally just like Amiibo, and even that's kind of like on its way out. But I remember when people were a little bit like, it's just.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to throw this in there. If you were ever okay with collecting Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering, but you are wholly against the idea of loot crates, I kind of question that, because it's the same exact thing. It's like, oh, I'm going to go buy the packs. Did I get the thing? Like the whole idea is like, I finally got it. Like that's what they're going for with that, I feel. I think it's being abused.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
in game
Pokemon cards and Magic cards, that system was being abused. If I do say so.
Just to address that point, what I've heard from people, because I'm not upset by this, but I understand that some people say, well, if you already, and it works different in different games, if you already had like all the things that you got like in your crate or whatever, if you already had the skins or the items, the weapons or whatever, then they're like redundant. And some games handle that differently. Like mobile games oftentimes will have systems where it's not redundant. Whatever you get, you still have. But there's some games where you get something that's redundant, and so it just doesn't go in your inventory because there's not a way for it to. So that you could theoretically get to a point where like you get a crate and you got nothing out of it, where like if you open a pack of Pokemon cards, even if you had every Pokemon there already, you still have the cards.
Yeah, true. You can still trade it.
You can trade them. They're still valuable,
right? So I mean, it's every game's doing it differently. So I don't know what games that would even apply to, because most games I feel like have a way to handle the redundancy. Like Fire Emblem Heroes, for example. Not that this is what people are complaining about, but games with gacha systems, usually you have like 5 of this guy and you combine them all to make the one dude stronger. You know, like they still have ways, like crafting systems and whatever. Yeah. But I see people blowing up about loot crates right now, I think just because it's just the hot thing right now. And it's like everyone decided to try
for that, yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be around forever. I really don't. I think some games will be able to make it work. I think other games are going to be like, we tried it. It didn't work. Businesses like to try crap themselves and then decide whether they should keep doing it or not.
Right.
And so,
and it is geared towards making a profit, but you can't be so upset about that, because that is what all of these companies are trying to do in the end.
There are pressures on these companies that in some ways are being put on them by their fan bases.
That's true.
That put constraints on, like, I want this game to look real, for example, or I want this game to have so many hours of stuff to experience or whatever. And we've talked about this with the price of video games before, but loot crates is a way for them to address this. And you might think that it's a bad way, but like to some degree, I do think they're reacting to constraints. I'm not blaming fans for the fact that loot crates exist. But video games, like the price of games, hasn't gone up in so long,
right.
And obviously there's other ways to make money that can work. The games as a service thing, I do not necessarily think is a bad idea. Grand Theft Auto 5 online has been killing it.
Is it?
I don't play it, but ever since it came out, it's been one of the top things, and so I think a lot of properties are going to gravitate that direction. And so if you were an Assassin's Creed fan, or if you were like a big AAA gamer, like where you went and you bought the big AAA releases every year, you're probably going to see this happen to all your games and be kind of upset about it.
Yeah, that sucks.
Because those are the games with the biggest budgets, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like if you're in a more niche genre like JRPGs, or you're in the indie stuff, I don't believe you're really going to see any of this here. And right. I think strictly because some games define themselves by not doing what AAA games are doing.
Yeah.
And so this is another way to differentiate. I feel like there's no loot crates. Like you see games sometimes on like the App Store or Google Play that'll say it's a one-time purchase game, which because that's so rare now, most games are free. Like the new Animal Crossing game, which Nintendo's actually supposed to be revealing tonight. I think it is.
I think right now. Be last night. For
is going to be a free to play with different and after what happened with Mario Run, it's like, well, I mean, if you're a business, decision maker like Nintendo, it's like Fire Emblem Heroes with a smaller install base has made way more money than Mario Run, which had banner ads on the iTunes App Store for like a month, like probably the most visible ad in like the Western world. You know what I mean? Like it's just fine. The numbers and the money are telling them to go there. So like HD, I'm sympathetic to you. If you're like, hey man, I really liked these games the way they were, but I think one thing that we know for a fact is that it's just going to keep changing. And so hopefully it gravitates towards something that's more acceptable to more people. But like, there's the whales out there. There's people willing to spend $15,000 on a video game.
Freaking can't
So it's like, as long as those people exist,
companies are going to try to take advantage. So would we all three more or less be in agreement that it would take literally like a nuclear holocaust for us to stop playing games?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, that's where I see it too. And we're I don't know. Maybe we're unique in that, but it would take a lot. Like I would be playing games. I thought once I had a kid, I wouldn't have time for games. That's not true. Kids sleep a lot. I have time for games though.
It's just been such an informative force in my life. I just can't imagine what life would have been like 30, 40, 50 years ago, let's say, where there were no video games. Like, I can't imagine a world with no video games. I literally can't, because I've never lived in one before.
Yeah.
So it's just been integral in like my development, I guess, in the way that I've interacted, in the way that I've pursued entertainment.
Well, you brought up Nier, right? Talking about how, like, it just brings up all sorts of like philosophical like issues and dilemmas, and just, I don't know, video games have, especially when it comes, and I think this is why Nietzschean philosophy is so common and prevalent in video games, but when you're experiencing things like that, especially as it has to do with like robots and artificial intelligence and stuff, you get to weird philosophical territory, right? And you can really learn stuff from video games. I mean,
for sure.
I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. I mean, that's been the case for me, and it's been kind of the reason why, for the most part, I pursue games with strong narrative. I feel like the experience is just so much different when you're participating, even if it's in a lighter sense than in a more linear, very character-focused game, rather than something more open-ended where you're supposed to become the character. Even in the former, example, I feel like I still get something more from experiencing a story that I participated in on whatever level it was than I do. Not more. I get a different experience than I do from observing a movie. Not that the two, one's more valuable than another. They're just different, and they're different in such a way to where I pursue this kind of experience on a wholly different scale than I do this one. So I just can't imagine. I really can't imagine a life where I'm just like, I'm done. I'm never playing a game again. I cannot see that happening for me.
Yep. But sympathies if that's happening for you, because everyone has a different line drawn in the sand, and when things cross into what you'd consider maybe sacred territory, I can understand reacting negatively to that.
Yeah, you can always become the equivalent of a video game hermit too, and only play old games.
Only play old games, man. Go up, live in the mountains with your SNES. Yeah, who knows?
All right. Well, some really great questions today. Thank you, everybody who submitted. If you would like to submit topics for next week, We go to Patreon first, so if you're a Patreon supporter, we'll always go there first to seek questions. You could also ask us on Discord in our podcast chat, or you can ask here in the comments. That's just the last place we source for it. So thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're listening to this audio only, for the 3 of you out there maybe at this point, we can't track it. We have no idea.
We don't know how many people. Could be thousands.
Who knows? Who freaking knows? All I know is that if you're listening to this audio only and you had no idea that we have a YouTube channel, you can find us on YouTube at Dark Pixel Gaming, and you can watch our videos there. A whole lot of Final Fantasy 13 discussion coming up in the next month or so after I'm done finished with the game.
That's when you're done finishing it.
When I'm done finishing it.
Actually describes
that actually
it very
makes
well.
sense, but yeah.
Do you know what, though? That actually does, because this may be the last time I ever play the game. We'll see. So, we'll see.
We should stream
appreciate
it. Last time Mike will ever play Final Fantasy.
Be
there.
People are going to come to that stream, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. They better.
The last time I ever touch Final Fantasy 13, everyone's going to come in and be like, "No, you suck. This game's awesome.
Come back." Final
Why
Fantasy
are you
13
such a hater?
is one of the few games that Edge magazine has given a perfect score to. Or was it Famitsu?
They did. Oh, I didn't.
Final Fantasy 13 2. Yeah, 10 out of 10 or 40 out of 40.
Speaking about the sequels, though, I have not played. Well, I have played. I quit. That should have been the example I brought up.
Oh, no.
I quit playing Final Fantasy 13 2 after about 10 hours, and I did not want to play it.
Oh, 10 hours, dang.
I didn't play very much.
Okay.
But now,
you got to do it now, dude.
I'm gonna dive back into it. But maybe I'll stream that. Maybe people would like that. Me to play Final Fantasy 13 2 and Lightning Returns, and Final Fantasy 10 2, which I've also not played.
All right.
Stream through that at some point. I'll keep you guys informed. I've been working on some templates, overlay templates for my Twitch channel that I may or may not revive. I have no idea. It's time constraint issue. Anyways, I'm going way off topic. We're done for today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Peace out.
Later.